Welcome, listeners, to the 7th installment of the UBERED podcast. I'm your host, Evan Kale. For 4 years, I was a full-time Uber and Lyft driver in Minneapolis, St. Paul. I gave more than 8,000 rides during that time period, and I wrote 2 books on the subject. UBERED, My Life as a Rideshare Driver, and the sequel, UBERED 2, both available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle. If you've read the books, you know a little bit about me, and if you haven't, I guess you're getting to know me through this podcast. But one thing you all may not know about me, I like to play with fire. I am an adventure seeker, and I have a colorful track record, let's just say, of making exciting choices that sometimes aren't the most logical ones, but always lead to some kind of road of excitement. And of course, the same was true when I was an Uber driver. I kept a series of rules. Most of them were governing rules to maximize my profits and properly run my business, but one of them was designed simply to thicken the plot and enhance the drama of the rides to the nth degree. And that rule was, if you invite me inside after the ride, I have to say yes. I can't say no. The only thing that would bar me from that is if I legitimately considered you to be super creepy or super dangerous. As you'll see in this coming episode, I wasn't always the best judge of character on that. This episode is called, Why Sure, Random Stranger, I Would Love to Come Into Your House. So before we get into it, let's talk about the genesis of the rule, because when I went out and signed up to be a rideshare driver, I certainly didn't think I would ever do something like this. In fact, I never thought I would write about it at all or have any kind of interesting experiences to tell people about later on. But as I mentioned, one of the first things that happened to me as a driver, I was out late on a Friday night. It was like my second week of driving, and I picked up these teachers, and they invited me in after the party to do some pot. No, they invited me in to smoke some pot, and being a pothead, that sounded great to me. So I went inside with these people after the ride, and suddenly I'm in this second grade teacher's decrepit basement, and he's got a doobie in his mouth, and he's sketching me so that he can add a picture of me to this bizarre art collection that he had of like these like weird abstract faces. And I look around and I realize, like, this is just bizarre. I have got to write about this. So I had mentioned my writing background to the teachers who were hanging out upstairs, and none of them were threatening or anything like that. They were actually very nice. But one of them suggested, when they heard about my screenwriting, hey, maybe you should turn Uber driving into a book. And so after I got home that night, I went into my closet and I dug out. I have a little like blank like journal. It's like a little like leather bound like black journal, like a diary. And so I wrote the Rideshare Diaries in the front cover, and that became my book. And the first entry that I had in this diary was going into these people's houses. So on the next page, I started sketching out some rules that I had to follow. And rule number 5 was, whenever I am invited inside, I must always say yes. Because if I can keep collecting stories of that quality and caliber, I'm going to have a hell of a book on my hands. So really, that's all this rule was. It was simply a device to thicken the plot. I immediately realized after leaving this weird scenario with these teachers that I had stumbled onto something really remarkable in this rule. The only trick was I just had to not get myself killed. And when I made this rule up, little did I realize how close I might come. So a little piece of background information about this podcast. What I do, I will think of a theme for each episode, and I'll sketch it on top of a piece of paper. By sketch, I mean write. I don't know why I'm saying writing says sketching. And then I will comb through both of my books, and I will find every story that has something to do with the theme that I'm trying to pick. Like the last episode was called Scary. So I went through my books, and I found all the stories that were scary. There were a few that fit the bill of scary, but this was the theme that had happened, and I kind of didn't touch those because I wanted to do an episode about all the times I went into people's houses. It was, I would say, maybe 20% scary, 80% chill. So going through, and I had never done this before, going through compiling all the times that I had been into people's houses and looking at them in chronological order, it's kind of shocking that I didn't just give it up, not right away, but that I didn't give it up in my first year of driving, because my first story that I found was Teacher's Party, and then there were a few others that I didn't write about where nothing interesting happened. A person invited me in after the ride, always to smoke pot, and I chilled out, smoked some pot, had like a whatever conversation, like just hung out with this person. Nothing interesting happened. It wasn't even worth writing about. I would stay for between 20 minutes to an hour, and then I would say thank you very much and excuse myself, and that was that. I never saw him again. I never exchanged phone numbers, nothing like that. just in and out, sampling a story, hoping maybe something more interesting would happen than what did. I mean, I guess we had some good conversations, but not like any discussions about like the genesis of the universe or what happens when you die or like anything really exciting like that. Just like typical, all right, let's talk about movies. Let's make a couple jokes. Okay, nice to meet you. Peace. But what stands out so much to me, though, is, like I said, so I got teacher's party, and then I have a few of these instances where I didn't even write about them. I remember them because they were fun and, like, these people were normal, but it wasn't worth writing about. But the next thing that was worth writing about was trip number 1765, which is called Dangerous Rule, which is the most dangerous thing that ever happened to me when I went into somebody's house after the ride. And I don't know why I didn't just give it up right then and there, because this should have spoken to me. Don't do this. This is not a smart idea. In this trip, it's July, it's the summer, it's like a Thursday night or something, and it's like 9 or 10, and I pick up this guy, this like middle-aged white guy outside of First Avenue, the music club, and he gets in, and he's very chill, and like I switch over. I was usually playing like Bonobo or Eastern Sun or Taiko, like basically just glorified elevator music, soothing music to keep people calm. But he didn't want to listen to that, so he goes, what do you like to listen to? I bet you don't like to listen to this stuff. Which, admittedly, I do like those artists, but after having them as my soundtrack, being a driver for years, I don't seek them out anymore. So I mainly like to listen to hip-hop and rap, and so for this guy, I go, okay, I'll put on something I like. So I put on Wu-Tang Clan, and we're jamming out to that, and he knows, he's got some grind. He's rapping to some songs, and, I'm going back and forth. We're having fun, and we're chatting. Well, he tells me he's just moved here from Colorado. He's an electrical engineer. Minnesota's a new place. He'd never really been here. He just kind of on a whim took a job. So, like I said, seems very normal. We're having a good conversation. As we're nearing his house, he starts asking me about marijuana laws in Minnesota, because he's just come from Colorado. So I say, hey, it's been decriminalized in Minneapolis rather recently. Don't get caught with it. Buying it can be kind of tricky, but we've got good stuff here. Just, it shouldn't be too different from where you're from. Just, don't be reckless with it because you will get a ticket. So he mentions, well, damn, I got this super blueberry kush, and, well, I just don't know where I'm going to get something this high quality. And I look at him, I go, wait, you have super blueberry? Wow, I can't get anything like that here. He goes, oh, do you want to come inside and smoke some? And I'm thinking like, oh, hell yes. This is what I'm talking about. So we get to his house, and I'm super excited. It's in South Minneapolis, and it's like, it's not a crappy house. It's a single guy's house, maybe 1,600 square feet, main floor and a basement. We go inside, all seems well. But when I step inside, I notice that there's nothing in this house. It's like a bare house. There's no furniture, there's no boxes, there's nothing. In the kitchen, there's a single table with 2 chairs. That seems to be it. So I look around and I'm like, where is everything? Are you still getting it shipped from Colorado? He goes, yeah, I'm still just, in the process of moving. Okay, this seems fine. So he shows me around his house. He shows me in the basement. And in the basement, there's not very many boxes. There's a TV. The TV's on its side. It hasn't even been set up yet. I'm like, okay, so you must have just got here. He's like, no, I got here a few weeks ago. Thinking like, okay, I don't know why you haven't unpacked everything after a few weeks, but I guess whatever, to each their own. I'm not going to judge. So he continues showing me a tour of this house, and he shows me into his bedroom. And I step into his bedroom, and I notice, oh my God, this guy has got a fucking arsenal of guns. Like, I'm not just talking a few. I mean, I'm talking shotguns, rifles, and I'm just like, I've gone from not expecting to see anything to suddenly I'm in front of an armory. And like my jaw just drops because I don't own any guns. I don't know much about guns. I don't see them very often. Guns kind of scare me. Now, let me pause and I just want to say I don't want to say I've come around on them because I still think that they should be outlawed. But I just wrote this novel called Wolf in the Jungle, and I had to do a lot of research on guns, and it created somewhat of an interest in guns with me. But so my opinions have changed slightly since I wrote UBERED, but not by much. What this guy has is insane. It's like this guy's prepping for the zombies or something. So, like I said, I'm just dumbfounded looking at all these guns. And he goes, hey, check it out. And he picks up a shotgun and goes, and he points it at me. And he's like laughing, and I'm just like, is that loaded? And he's like, oh, yeah. And then he's like, oh, sorry. And he puts the gun away. He wasn't aiming it at me like he was going to do something crazy. But I had a loaded gun pointed at me. And this guy just kind of thought nothing of it. And so right then and there, with his gun pointed at me, I realized, what the fuck have I gotten myself into? What was I thinking with this rule? This is insane. And I casually mentioned to him that I'm a black belt, or I'm getting ready to take my black belt test or something like that. Something to make it sound like if you pull that trigger, there's going to be problems. But really, it was just like a last-ditch defense mechanism I muttered. And probably, I had so much fear in my voice that it was probably like, I'm a black belt. But yeah, so don't fuck with me, boy. Yeah. Anyway, so I have soiled my pants, but then he offers to smoke. And then I remember, oh yeah, that's right. I actually came in here for a reason. And instead of just leaving like I should have, I think to myself, well, I'm sure going to get my money's worth now because I just had a fucking gun pointed at me over this. So I stayed with him and we smoked. And true to his word, it was super blueberry. I got so fucked up I couldn't drive after that. Well, I could drive. I chose not to give rides for the safety of the public. One of the only times that I would do that after smoking pot. So I stayed for maybe another 20 minutes and then I drove home. And when I drove home, I went and I sat on my porch for about maybe an hour, and I just had a long reflection in my head of, maybe I shouldn't do that. That probably wasn't the smartest idea, and that could have unfolded in a much worse way for me. But of course, like always, I chose not to listen to myself. The next time around, I would be the danger. Except not really. So the next story is called Home Invader. It's trip 2708, and it takes place about maybe 2 months after this happened. So I had created a YouTube show, and I had written about this quite a lot in UBERED. My original thought was I wanted to do laugh all you want. I wanted to do a cross-promotional kind of thing. I thought if the book starts doing really well, and if I write about this YouTube show that I created in my car, then everybody who's reading the book is going to check me out on YouTube too. Didn't work. Like I said, I pulled the plug on my YouTube show. It was an interview-style show. I couldn't afford to keep the budget up. It was like $100 an episode. I wasn't getting that many viewers, and I was putting an insane amount of work into it. Somewhat of a sore subject, just because I put so much effort into it, and I put myself on the line so hard, and it just didn't work at all. It was kind of an embarrassing failure. Anyway, with this story, I had been in the newspaper this day. So my family's got a friend, CJ. She's the Star Tribune's gossip columnist. Yes, the Star Tribune has a gossip columnist. This woman is legendary in the state. She's had her post for 30 years. She had a feud with Prince. In fact, the song Billy Jack Bitch is about CJ because Prince hated her so much. In fact, she probably wouldn't like me saying this, but whatever. She's not going to listen to this. She's been a figure in my life for a long time. I've known her my whole life, and she's written about my mom quite a lot when my mom was a big deal as a makeup artist. And she's written about me a few times, too. When I had a bunch of screenplays getting into film festivals in 2012, she wrote an article about me. So I had asked her to do an article about my YouTube show, and it was it was going to be a big release about me because I was coming out in a newspaper. I had never done that before because the show was called In the Closet, and the pun was I'm gay or bisexual. So an interview style show with a sexually questionable individual in a closet, it seemed like a funny idea. Okay, whatever. So she wrote about me, and I have been getting some attention from writers that day who recognized me because CJ published a photo of me. Actually, now that I remember it right, CJ published a photo of me in drag because I had done my mom. The article that CJ wrote, I interviewed my mom, and my mom did my makeup as I interviewed her. In fact, you can still watch that interview on YouTube. But anyway, so people were recognizing me as I was driving them. And it's maybe about 10 p.m. at night, and I have this woman is probably about 60. She gets in, and she just randomly starts talking about Hillary Clinton, and just goes on this tirade of how awesome Hillary Clinton is. This was the summer of 2015, and I was a Bernie Sanders supporter, so I was in no mood to hear this. But whatever, she's perfectly pleasant. At least she's not talking about how awesome Donald Trump is. So I'm listening to it. Okay, we're making conversation, and then she gets a phone call, this woman, and she goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, my wife is calling me, excuse me." And I overhear her talking to this woman on the phone, and it's like a child answering for the parent, "Yes, I'll be home soon, I'm on my way, I'm sorry I'm late, I'm sorry, I know, I'll be home soon." And I'm thinking my God, what an overpossessive spouse. This has been making me never want to get married, just hearing this interaction this woman's having with her wife. So she hangs up, and she goes, "Oh, I'm going to be in trouble with the wife if we don't get home soon." And it's okay, I'm not going to speed so that you can get home to your overly possessive spouse. Chill out, lady. She made a few more comments about how you need to drive a little bit faster, but it's lady, just be quiet. I'm not going to compromise our safety. This is ridiculous. So I keep talking to shift conversation away because this woman is getting a little relentless. I need to get home. I need to get home. Well, we continue talking, and she looks at me and she goes, "Hey, I recognize you. You're that closet guy." "Well, not really, but you're the one who came out in the newspaper and you have the YouTube show. Good for you." So she starts, when she realizes that I too am gay, she lightens up. She quits drilling me about getting home so quick, and we're having a good conversation. Well, we pull up into her driveway, and this woman's wife is sitting on the front steps like a loyal little dog, like waiting. I'm thinking, like, this isn't cute. This is creepy. We pull in, and she goes, "Hey, why don't you come up and meet my wife?" I'm thinking, like, what? And she goes, come on, just for a sec. Like, come on up. Like, say hello. Maybe come in for a sec. It'll be fun. And think, okay, well, you're definitely not a serial killer. You probably don't own any guns. Sure. So I step out of the car, and I take a few steps toward the house where this woman's sitting on the front stoop. And the woman on the step is, like, visibly agitated. And she goes, Linda, who's that man? Linda, who's that man? Why is he coming here? Linda, tell him to stop. I don't like this. And, like, I freeze because this woman is getting really defensive and really upset really quick. I haven't even said a word. I've gotten out of my car with this woman's wife. Clearly, I'm not a threat. Clearly, I'm the guy who just drove her home. I even got the door for her wife. So as I'm walking, like, I stop, and this woman continues walking forth. She goes, "It's okay. He was my Uber driver. I just wanted him to come up and meet you. He's a brother," quote-unquote brother. I've never heard he's a gay like us being called a quote-unquote brother, like it's like a movement in the 60s or something like that. I thought it was an interesting term. So upon hearing this, the woman lights up a little bit, like just a little bit, and she's like slightly less agitated. She goes, okay, well, very nice to meet you. And like, I walk up and like I go to shake her hand, and she touches my hand like as if it's made of lava, and she's looking at me like she's a deer and I'm a lion. Like, I just don't belong. I'm going to do something crazy. I'm not to be trusted. Like, it was as if we're almost in like a Mexican standoff. And this woman who brought me up is like oblivious that her wife is crazy paranoid. And so she tries to facilitate a conversation that, like, I don't want to be here. Like, I'm really uncomfortable now because this woman seems like she might like do something crazy. And she wants me gone because she's acting like I'm about to just whip out a knife and like rape and kill them both. We exchange no more than a few pleasantries before she just ushers her wife into the house and is like, "Okay, you need to go now. Goodbye." It's like, okay, yeah, no love lost here. You're right. I do need to go. You're a fucking whack job, lady. So I'm walking back to my car. I think to myself, like, what lesbian is this fearful of men? This is ridiculous. I guess that's all there is to that story. It's called Home Invader because this woman was treating me like I was like about to be a home invader or something. It was totally batshit. But in this next story, maybe I was a danger. Maybe just a little bit. This next story is called Party Tricks. It's trip number 2996. I hated driving college kids. They were the bane of my existence. The biggest problem with them, not only was it the drunken behavior, but it was the fact that oftentimes they try to do the clown car shit. Now, I'm going to have an episode coming up called I Hate You. And it's all the riders that I hate, all the types of behavior, and just little things that would drive me nuts as a rideshare driver. But to briefly speak about one of those things, I called it clown car riding. And that's where a passenger wants to turn your car into a literal rolling joke, a clown car. They want to stuff 8 or 9 passengers in your 4 or 5-seater car. So that kind of stuff with college kids, it was typical. And it drove me crazy. Now, I'll get into why, again, later. But just know that every time that I picked up somebody in Dinkytown, the U of M, the like mini town where there's like restaurants and bars and stuff right off of campus, I braced because usually there were clown car riders I had to deal with. So I pulled up outside of this notoriously obnoxious bar called the Library. And I'm waiting, and I'm thinking like, oh God, please don't pull this clown car shit. I'm so not in the mood for this tonight. Well, luckily, my passengers that came out, though they were kind of drunk, they were not pulling this clown car thing. So there's 3 of them. There's 3 guys that get in the car, and we're going maybe about a mile away to their house on campus. And we're talking as we're driving, and the subject of marijuana comes up, and they invite me inside after the ride. Well, we go inside with them, and they've got some pizza that they're willing to share with me. So before I know it, I'm smoking dope, and I'm having pizza with these guys, and we're having a good time. Well, these guys asked me about my background. What do you do? And I didn't feel like talking about writing, really. So whenever I didn't feel like talking about writing with my background, I would talk about martial arts. As I've mentioned again, I have been doing martial arts since I was 13, and this summer I was training for my black belt test, which was coming. Maybe I had already taken it at this point. Yeah, come to think of it, I had just taken it, so I had just gotten my black belt. And one thing I had come to find, particularly amongst younger people, when I mentioned that I was doing martial arts, that I had gotten a black belt, was like, oh, you're a black belt. Like, waving a cape in my face, or like saying it with some degree of doubt. Now, I don't want to talk myself up too much, but let's just say if you see me move, ain't no degree in doubt. I move like lightning, I strike like thunder. I've been doing this shit for a long time, and I'm pretty good at it. So these kids doubting me, it's like, no, you don't know what you're laughing at here. So, I start trying to say, like, it's more serious than I'm making it sound. And this one kid is like, oh yeah, well, show me something. You want to see the bull? I'm going to show you the horns. So I have this kid stand in front of me, and this is like a martial arts party trick. I've done this before. Bruce Lee had the 1-inch punch, and what that was, from an inch away, Bruce Lee could punch you and send you flying. But he might be the greatest martial artist of all time. I'm not Bruce Lee, but what I can do, I can throw a punch at full force and stop maybe about half an inch in front of the target, maybe even closer. I can get so close that the flesh of my fist can make contact with the flesh on your cheek without driving in. If I was a few centimeters deeper, I would be punching you. But just by touching you, just with like a little whip touch, it's very scary, and you feel all of the power that's been put in your face, but you don't feel any of the bite to it. The only thing you really feel is my flesh against yours, and maybe the whip snap of my sleeve against your flesh. Like, actually, I'm going to punch the microphone. Do you hear that little snap? That's just my sleeve. What that noise comes from, when you punch, the last bit of your punch, maybe the last inch of it, you turn your fist. You turn it to drive, and it just increases the power exponentially. It's the proper way to throw a punch. So I did this to this guy. I did one of these mock punches, or like, I punched his face, but like all I did was just touch the cheek. And this guy yelped like a dog. Like, he's like, oh my God! And then he was like freaked out. He's like, he hit me, but he didn't hit me, but I felt him hit me. And this guy's so upset. Now all of his friends are standing up and they're looking at me, and they're all super agitated. Without warning, I can do the same thing with a kick. And so I threw a knife foot kick, and I touched where his ribs would be, but I just touched the shirt. I didn't like even touch his flesh, because right there, I mean, if I'm not careful, I can kick somebody and break their ribs. So I did that to him, and now he's just like, it's like he's seen a ghost. And I'm looking at the other three, and all three of them are looking at me like, who the fuck are you? Why did we make the mistake of letting you in here? You are dangerous. So I'm just like, okay, at this point, I'm thinking in my head, I'm going to roll with this. I'm going to scare these guys. So I bent over, and I picked up an empty pop can off of the ground, and I stuck it in this kid's hand. I go, hold this steady. And I kicked it right out of his hand without touching his hand. With that, I bowed to them, and I left. And something tells me they never, ever invited an Uber driver inside again after that. And I would not go into anyone's house for probably about 6 months after. But then, and now we're in Ubered too, by the way. So I had my crash with my 520 or my 535, and Ubered 1 has concluded. Now we're into Ubered 2, and I've only got just a few instances where I went into people's houses. And again, there were some episodes where I just didn't write about it. It just wasn't very interesting. Like this one time, I've done some work here in Minneapolis writing scripts for music videos for local rappers. And so I recognized this one individual. I had never worked with him, but he was a friend of somebody I had worked with, and he recognized me. So he invited me in after I dropped him off to go see his new recording studio and smoke a blunt with his crew, which sounds like it might be an interesting adventure, but it wasn't. But the interesting adventure that I'd like to discuss, my first interesting going into the person's house in Ubered 2, might actually be, if not my favorite story that I ever collected as an Uber driver, certainly one of them. It's trip 3712, and it's called New Bugatti, and it has nothing to do with the Bugatti. It's a Saturday night, I'm out driving, it's winter, and I give my first couple rides, nothing interesting happens. And then suddenly the rates start to take off. So I sit and I shut off my apps, and I'm waiting for the rates to keep climbing. Because if I can get a 3 or 4x surge rate, like kind of toward the start of my shift, that's going to make a big impact on my entire night. So I'm sitting and I'm waiting for these rates to keep climbing. And I pass on one ride request that's 1.5 times the rate. I pass on one that's 1.8 times the rate. I pass on one that's 1.9 times the rate. And then there's one that's 1.7. Which means if you hit a high and then it starts to go low, that means it's going to keep going low. The pinnacle is come and gone. you missed it. The rate I finally ended up taking, it was like 1.2 times the rate, so should have acted earlier, and I didn't. It's at a gay bar called Lush, and my passenger's name is Blake. I've been to all the gay bars around town except for Lush. Lush is more of a, gay, lesbian, same thing. It's more of a lesbian bar. It's more geared for women, at least that's kind of the reputation around town, but obviously anyone's welcome. So I'm waiting for Blake. Blake comes out, and he's my age, but not quite what I'm looking for in terms of a guy. He's not very attractive. He's fat. And he's got this face where I can tell what this guy's going to look like at any stage in life. He's got these great big lips and this super round face, and it's like I can picture him now. I can picture him 10 years ago. I can picture him as a child. I can picture him as an old man. And so when I see a face like that, it doesn't leave much to the imagination. I just don't like it. Though, needless to say, I'm not very interested in him, but I'm certainly willing to engage in pleasant conversation. So Blake tells me he is from Louisiana, and he has forgotten his ID, and they won't let him into this bar without his ID, and he makes a big hissy fit about not being able to get in. And I have to remind him that this is Minnesota, and in Minnesota, they're pretty strict about carding people. I don't make it down to the South too often, but every time I do go down to the South, there seems to just be kind of a general recklessness about things, and one of those I've noticed is regulations aren't as strict. You don't get carded in bars, you don't get carded at the door. And I've got kind of a youthful face. I still get carded for R-rated movies sometimes. But whenever I go down south, forget it. There's just, like I said, there's just this recklessness about things. So he is kind of mystified that they won't let him in without his ID. And I'm kind of okay, well, I'm sorry, that's just the way Minnesota is. That everyone's got a thumb up their ass here about that kind of stuff. So in making conversation, I asked Blake, I go, so how was that place, though? How did it seem for a gay bar? Does it seem anything like it does in Louisiana? Does it seem gayer? Or I should say more festive? And, he starts kind of telling me about it. And I go, okay, well, I haven't been to that one yet. And he looks and he's like, well, wait a minute. You're not gay. And I go, well, for all purpose sake, yeah, I am. And then, he leans really close to me after I say this, and I think to myself, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have said that. So we start talking about the gay scene here. And then randomly, this is another one. He just starts, apparently he has been working on the Hillary Clinton campaign, because now we're in 2016. And he will not shut the fuck up about Hillary Clinton. And I'm trying to say, I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter, just drop it. And he's not taking a hint. He's still talking about whatever. So we finally get to the place where he is staying. It's this luxury high-rise apartment in downtown Minneapolis. And this building it's a newer building, and it does not look like it belongs in the Minneapolis landscape. It looks like it belongs in Miami. It's 40 stories tall. It's got a very oblique, slender shape. It's chrome, or it's not chrome, but it almost looks like it's chrome. Seriously, it just looks like it belongs in Dubai or something. It's very strange. And this is kind of the thing that's going on here in Minneapolis is these luxury apartments that are just so weird looking because it's unlike any kind of architecture that's ever been in the city here that I've seen in my lifetime. And it's just springing up all over the place. Anyway, so Blake tells me he's staying with some friends that are living here. And he wants to go back to this bar. We're going from the bar to this building, back to the bar just so he can get his ID. So he goes in, he gets his ID, he comes back out, and as we're driving back to the bar, he wants me to come and hang out with him. And I'm thinking oh, you are so not my type. I don't want to, no. But then he mentions that he's got a bunch of friends that are really good looking. And particularly he asked me, he goes, do you like twinks? Which, for those of you who don't know the lay term, a twink is a young, generally good looking, hairless gay man whose age is hard to place. Basically I'm a twink. I like to think I'm a twink. Maybe I'm kind of pushing it now that I'm getting older. I'm almost 30. But at one point, I was a twink. I'm just making myself feel bad, and I'm digressing. So Blake advertises that his friends are twinks, which is, well, that's my scene when I'm after boys. So I think, okay, now we're cooking with gas. Now you've got my interest. So I suddenly change my attitude. I go, oh, I would love to hang out then, if that's the case. We get back to Lush. And I say, well, I'm not going to be drinking and driving. I'm going to be drinking if I'm going to hang out with you. Because if you're lying to me, I'm definitely going to need to be drunk. I didn't say that part. So I say, I'm going to go and return my car home. I'm going to catch an Uber. I will meet you back here. Let me know if you guys move someplace else. Okay, cool. Well, he grabs me, and he just kisses me. And I'm not going to push him away or be a jerk, but I'm just thinking oh, this is gross. And he separates off from me, and I remember the saliva bands from my lips on I'll stop. I can just imagine all of your guys' faces when I say that. But Blake gets out of the car, And I step on the gas to get home as quick as I can. So I'm back home within 10 minutes. I come flying in the door. And Stephanie, who, my high school friend, one of my best friends in life, who I've been living with for years, she looks at me kind of puzzled when I walk in through the door. And she's like, what's the big hurry? And I go, I'm about to hang out with a bunch of beautiful boys. And one not so good looking one. I jump into the shower, quickly shower off, put on my best clothes, and I get a text from Blake that they have moved. Now they're at Saloon, which is another gay bar. This one is in central downtown Minneapolis. Fast forward, 25, 30 minutes later, and I'm walking into the Saloon looking around for them. And I see Blake in the back corner, and as I'm approaching, I see the guys that he's with, and he's with like 6 or 7 of them. Not a single one of them is good looking. Blake fucking lied to me. Maybe he thought they were good looking, but I sure as hell didn't. I was pretty pissed. So I see immediately what I have bitten off, and I'm thinking like, okay, am I going to chew it, or am I going to spit it up, run out, go back to my car, and keep Ubering for the night? Well, I'm already here. I might as well. I go to the bar. I grab a drink. I join Blake and his friends who qualify as false advertising. Let's put it that way. But one of them, who has his back to me, is talking to somebody else. Just looking on from the back, I like the body type. It looks like he's in like good shape and like fits the bill for what Blake was saying I might find. Well, this guy turns around and I start talking to him, and he's very attractive. He's got some facial hair, which is a deal breaker for me. But other than that, this guy's really attractive. And so as I am talking to this guy, he's a little weird. He's not drinking, I noticed right away. He's got water. And I ask him, like, why aren't you drinking? And he tells me, like, a sad story about going off the deep end in Los Angeles. And, like, he also mentioned that he's got, like, some dad issues. Like, his dad was an alcoholic or something like that. So it seemed like he had some baggage. But as we're talking, he's normal. He's nice. He's my type. He's very masculine acting. Like I said, like, just, like, a very attractive guy. And so I'm enjoying talking to him. And as I am talking to him, I start to think, boy, you look kind of familiar. And I mentioned it to him. And since he said he had been in L.A., I said, have you ever acted in something? Have I seen you in something? And he says, well, you might say that. And I go, oh, okay, well, you did some films? And he goes, yeah. I go, what'd you do, some porn? Like, kind of joking. And he goes, yeah. And then I realize, holy shit. Holy shit. Oh, my God. I'm talking to one of my favorite porn stars. Jesus H. Christ. How in the good fuck does this happen in Minnesota of all places? And so the look on my face was like, I mean, I almost had the most animated reaction of my life. I think I did jump up and down when I realized it. And I said, it's you. I know you. I love you. Or I love your porn. I think the reality was I had it bookmarked. Funny side story, and I don't even know if I'm going to get into this other story in my podcast. He's not the first porn star that I've encountered that I knew through Uber. I mean, I guess this wasn't really through, this was kind of through Uber. It was through an Uber ride I'm talking to this guy. But about a year prior, I drove a very good-looking young guy who looked very familiar. And as I was driving him, I realized, oh, son of a bitch, it's him. It's definitely him. It's without a doubt him. So again, this is happening to me, but this time it's the terms are a little bit different. So I'm thinking to myself, well, I mean, now this wasn't just worth it. This makes up for every bum encounter I've had going into people's houses or hanging out with people after the ride. I mean, shit. This is like a Christmas wish come true. So we keep talking. We're gonna call the porn star. We're gonna call him Mike. Well, Mike, the more I talk, I mean, he's exactly what you might imagine a damaged porn star to act like. I mean, he's talking about how the porn industry completely destroyed him. He starts giving me the scoop on the porn studio that he was associated with, which I might get in trouble for saying the name. Fuck it. Helix Studios makes good porn. So it was really interesting to hear the kind of the backdoor story of how this porn business works. This guy tells me that the guy who owns the company, like if you want to keep your job with this, or if you want to keep your modeling, they call it a modeling contract with this porn producer, then you basically have to fuck him. And I've seen some photos of this guy, and he's exactly what you would think a scummy LA gay porn producer looks like. I don't know. I've never met the guy. Maybe he's a nice guy. Maybe I was just getting a biased story. But from what I was hearing from Matt's account, it sounded pretty horrific. Well, then he goes on to tell me that although he was a rising star in this porn company, because this porn company, like, they're probably one of the headliners for gay porn. I mean, I guess I'm not an expert. I don't know who's all out there. But I do know that they, like, every time you visit a gay porn website, you can see links to this one company. So they do quite a bit of work. Well, Matt reveals that he was on a upward trajectory career with this porn company, but pirating kind of fucked him over. And I'm thinking to myself, like, oh God, I'm so not going to mention to you that that's how I found you. And between the drugs and the lifestyle and everything else, and just like the shadiness of it all, it burned him out. So he came back to Minnesota where he had some roots. And that was how I ended up talking to one of my favorite porn stars. But it gets better. We stay at the bar for maybe about 2 hours or so, and I'm talking to this guy the entire time. By this point, Blake has tried to hit on me a few times, hoping that by me agreeing to hang out with him and his friends that he was going to get me. Well, he wasn't going to get me. He had no shot in hell. It doesn't matter. He could have gotten me Bill Cosby drunk, and I still wouldn't have given it up for him. Well, we finally leave around bar close, and we're stumbling back to this high-rise apartment where Blake is staying. And Matt reveals that he lives there, but he doesn't really specify the terms. And I'm kind of thinking as we're walking in, like, you must have made a lot of money because this place is really expensive. By the way, I said I was going to call him Mike. I guess we'll just call him Matt because I've called him Matt several times now. Consistency. Anyway, we go up like 30 floors. We go into this one apartment where there are several gay men. They're all passed out. Most of them are naked. And we just kind of step over them. We help ourselves to some drinks. And then Matt says, oh, this isn't even my apartment. I just have to stop in here because I'm house sitting for this one. No, I am in the one 2 floors up. So we help ourselves to a few more drinks at this random-ass person's apartment. And then we go up 2 floors into another. And like, it looked identical to the last one. It must be like every unit like looks exactly the same. We go into this new unit, and there's no one in there. Most of the lights are off. And we come in, and now Blake and I start going shot for shot because at this point, I just want Blake to pass out. He's the third wheel. I don't want to deal with him. I want to try and hook up with this porn star. I want to make something happen. This is too good of an opportunity not to seize. Well, bam, about 15 minutes later, Blake has passed out. It only took 5 shots of gin. I downed him like a boss because I drink too much. And Matt just sat there and watched. So once he was out, then we start talking again. But we don't get very far before I suddenly hear, it sounds like someone is trying to do an impression of a monster. It's like, and I look at Matt and I'm like, what the fuck is that? But before he can even answer, this woman comes out of the bedroom, topless, the biggest fake tits I have ever seen, cradling a small hairless dog in her arms. It's like, I guess Dr. Evil, I don't know what kinds of dogs are. Dr. Evil had a cat from Austin Powers that was hairless. This is a dog that is the equivalent of that. This is the ugliest fucking dog I've ever seen. She comes out, stumbling out of this bedroom, this woman, tits bouncing everywhere, walks right past me, doesn't acknowledge me, doesn't acknowledge Matt, throws open a cabinet, just starts rifling through it, finds a pill bottle, throws it back like a drink, and then just goes staggering back into the bedroom. Door slams, she's out like a light, that's it. And I look at Matt and I go, what just happened? And he goes, oh, that's Cindy, she lives here. So this porn star has burned out in LA and comes retreating to Minnesota where this 50-something-year-old woman is living and is living with her. And he starts trying to explain this relationship that's going, and like, for the life of me, I can't follow what this is. It seems to be exactly as bizarre and strange as it sounds to you. Well, fast forward another 2 hours, I have convinced Matt to smoke some weed with me because he will smoke weed. He's not drinking, but weed is okay. So we take this woman's car. She has like kind of a nice brand new car. He just has unlimited access to all of this woman's nice things. So we take her car 2 miles to my house. I run in. I get my weed. We go back to this apartment. We're smoking a blunt. And before I know it, the sun is peeking up through the curtains. And I'm being passed a blunt from one of my favorite porn stars as he's telling me about all the past lives that he has lived and how he thinks he's psychic and how he's seen his own death. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, all of this happened because I didn't pick one of those surge rides, because I tried to keep getting a more expensive ride. If I had taken that one, like that 1.8x ride or something like that, I never would have had this encounter. What a crazy, crazy night. Well, we go to bed, and I wake up like at noon the next day to the sound of screaming. And I'm in bed with this guy. We didn't hook up, but, I mean, we're naked in bed. And I look at him, and I'm like, is that Blake screaming? What's going on? And he goes, yeah, there's a Reiku master here, or Reiki master, whatever the fuck they're called. And I'm like, what is oh, forget it. I don't care. I have the worst headache possibly I've ever had in my life. Like, it just felt like I had a gunshot wound to the head. Well, I stuck around for maybe another 20, 30 minutes, and then I left. It kind of seemed like I was wearing out my welcome, especially because I was still despite the fact that I hadn't drank in a while, I was still really drunk. And now that the woman, Cindy, who owned this place was more sober, she wasn't too happy that her friend, or whatever the hell this guy was to her, brought home some random dude. So I excused myself, but as I'm walking out, and I got an Uber home, but as I'm walking out and hailing the Uber, I think to myself, my God, just like that song, New Bugatti. I woke up in a new Bugatti. I woke up in a porn star's bedroom. That's the closest that I am ever going to come to that song as long as I live. And since that was a 15-minute story, I'm going to condense my last 3, even though I could probably talk about each one for another 15 minutes. We'll skip ahead. We'll stick with the gay theme. We'll just jump ahead about a year. This is trip 5,811. It's called Thanksgiving Turkey. I'm going to make a long story short here. It's bar close, or it's like after bar close. I get one final expensive ride from Lyft. It's outside of saloon. There's always kind of a hopeful voice in my mind whenever I would pick up guys from saloon that like, hey, maybe this is where I meet my next boyfriend or something like that. So I go and pull up, and it's like 3 very drunk, very animated young gay men, and 2 of them not attractive. One of them is attractive. So they pile into the car, and they're only going to Uptown. Well, they convinced me to go into their house after the ride, and I do. And as I'm sitting in their house, in their apartment, they pour me a glass of wine. It started to get kind of creepy really quick. I realize all 3 of them are looking at me like I'm a Thanksgiving turkey, and they're trying to get me to stay overnight, and they're trying to start a 4-way, which I'm just not comfortable with. It just seems like a lovely way to get my ass excavated like a salt mine. I stayed here for maybe about 25 or 30 minutes, and then I excused myself. And the good-looking one followed me out the door. He's like, okay, I guess I'll go home too. And as we're walking out, we get outside of the building, and I go, okay, very nice to meet you. And he just grabs me, and he feverishly starts making out with me. And I kind of like it at first, but then, like, just in kissing him for, like, 10 seconds, I think to myself, like, there's something about this I just don't like. You are suddenly way less attractive than you were 20 seconds ago. So I separated from him, said thanks, and I left. That was that. But now, listeners, I'm going to really shock you. I did often get the question, have you ever hooked up with one of your passengers? And the answer is yes, and it's not a guy. It happened twice. The first time, again, I'll make a long story short. I had this young girl in my car. She was like maybe 21 or 22. I picked her and her friend up from a concert, and she called me using the fact that Uber let you connect with your driver a day after the ride. She called me after I dropped her off, and she left her personal phone number. Well, we got together the next night, and I ended up having sex with her. But the next day, she was acting really bizarre. She smoked all of my weed, and she stole Steph's jacket on her way out the door. So I never saw her again after that. But then a year later, this brings us to trip 6,208. So as I had mentioned, I had come out as gay, and then I kind of retracted it because I realized I still had feelings for women. It's very complicated, and I don't like labels. Like, why should somebody label themselves as one way or another? Sexuality is fluid. Human beings are fluid. I like to joke I was born in the wrong time period. I should have been born in ancient Rome because I would have fit right in. Anyway, so I pick up this woman. Her name is Lauren. She's got blonde hair. She's in her mid-30s. Very attractive. A little intoxicated. She smells like cigarettes and, like, wine. Well, she's mad at me because she was standing in St. Paul and I just, like, missed her. Like, I just didn't see her, like, waving her phone. And she was standing not where she dropped the pin. So I had to circle around the block a few times and it was cold. When she got in the car, she was pissed. She calms down after about a minute. And then suddenly, she's being, like, really friendly and talkative to me. And when we get to her apartment, which is maybe about 3-4 minutes away, she goes, do you smoke weed? And I go, why do I smell like it? Like, thinking, like, oh, are you going to report me? She goes, no, you seem kind of cool. You seem like the type. And so I go, oh, well, yes, I do. She goes, would you like to come inside and smoke some? Sure. So I go and I dig some out of my trunk, and we go in. And we're chatting for a while, and I'm kind of trying to figure out, like, where this is going. I mean, she's intoxicated, so I'm certainly not going to make a move, but she kind of seems like she wants to fuck. And after about 25 or 30 minutes, that's the direction our conversation shifts. We agree it wouldn't be a good idea that night, so I make out with her, I leave, and then the next night, or maybe it was a few nights later, I came back, and I ended up seeing this woman for about 6 months. Like, we weren't dating or anything, but we had a very passionate relationship, and this fundamentally changed my outlook on sexuality. I had almost felt guilty about it at first because, like I said, I had come out as gay, and then I was like, well, now I'm backtracking. How the hell am I going to explain this? So ultimately what I arrived at is fuck labels. I'm going to do what I want, and to confine myself to a label it's ridiculous. So with that, we are going to move into the final story, trip 3,740, flying coincidence. And now we're going to be backtracking because this is about a year before this, maybe even a little bit more. I had a car full of young, maybe mid-late 20s, really drunk dudes. There were 3 of them. 2 of them were intoxicated, and one was like about to be puking. We dropped this one off first at his house. They have to walk. The 2 friends have to get out and walk this guy into his house. They get back in the car. They're apologetic. It's fine. Once the really drunk one is out of the car, these 2 are going to downtown Minneapolis to the Renaissance Hotel. And as we're driving, one of them remarks that I look kind of familiar. And we keep talking. I asked, did you go to the University of Minnesota? He says, no, but I spent a lot of time down there. My fraternity had an event with the chapter at Minnesota. I went to school in North Dakota. And so I would go down for this event every year, and I would spend some time on campus then. Well, it turns out this individual and I were in the same fraternity, and I had met him years prior at this event when he would come down with his chapter. I just didn't remember. And we're reminiscing now for the rest of the drive. And when we arrive at the Renaissance Hotel, they invite me in, and they say, we're airline pilots now, and you should see the suite that they gave us. It's the coolest thing. And I had always wanted to kind of check out the inside of the Renaissance. It's an old hotel. Very historic and very just like a swanky, cool place. I valet my car once we arrive, and I go in with them, and we sit at the bar, we have a beer, and we're chatting, and we're watching all these just these eclectic people in this hotel bar, and it's there's this one dude that seems like he's definitely high on cocaine, and he's going from single woman to single woman, trying to hit on him, and it's just not going well. And then he goes up to this one who we were all guessing when we first sat down was a prostitute, and sure enough, she's the only one who's interested in him. 2 of them disappear. And then the bar kind of shuts down because it's getting late. So we go up to this hotel room, and my God, they weren't kidding. I can only imagine how much this hotel room costs per night. This guy tells me that somebody at the airline fucked up because they should not be staying in a hotel room this nice. We open the fridge, and not only have these guys gotten the nicest hotel room, but the airline has provided them with a fridge full of beer. We crack open a few more. We share some stories about college. And then these guys invite me to be on their flight that they are flying the next day because they're going back to North Dakota for a hockey game. So I'm thinking to myself, I am all in for going in after the ride and hanging out with a person, but taking them up on a plane ticket to North Dakota to go to a hockey game, it just sounds like a festivity of things that I might come to later regret. So I kindly declined their invitation, shook hands with them, and that was that. I excused myself and left. I never saw them again, but it was a crazy coincidence that these guys ended up in my back seat when I had met them years earlier, and just in meeting them again through Uber, I got to see some cool things, including this old historic hotel room that, well, I'm not about to spend $1,000 a night, so I certainly will never see it again. There's also a story of revenge. There was somebody I did not get along with in the fraternity, and I got back at them, and I was never able to share that I got back at them with anyone because nobody could relate to it. Nobody really care. But I told it to these guys because they knew who this other person was, and my God, were they amused. And that was cool to be able to finally share that story. I guess I'll cue you all in because I'm sure you're all curious. I was able to obtain a key to this individual's room, and I was the only person there on holidays because everybody else would go home to their families except for me. So, on Christmas, when nobody was there, I would go into his room and, I guess I just won't say any more of what I did, but it secured me a first-class ticket to hell. It was pretty fucking evil, but he was an asshole to me, and he was anti-Semitic, so fuck him. But listeners, we're at the end of the episode. I want to thank everyone for giving me your time and attention. I have 3 books out: UBERED, My Life as a Rideshare Driver, the sequel, UBERED 2, and my new novel, Wolf in the Jungle, all available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle. And if you live in the Minneapolis area, the Hennepin County Library is now carrying all 3 of my titles. Listeners, you have been Ubered. I'm Evan Gale. Signing off.